Adorable moment, little soldier salutes Royal Guard horse guards. Royal Guard, King's Guard horse. Families, tourists, and children from all over the world gathered early, eager to witness the famous ceremony of the King's Guard. The air buzzed with excitement, a mixture of chatter, laughter, and the occasional clatter of camera shutters. Everyone seemed to have come with the same purpose, to see the guards in their perfectly pressed red uniforms, standing tall with shining black boots, and to catch a glimpse of the majestic horses that accompanied them. Among the crowd was a small child, no more than 5 or 6 years old, who stood out for more than just their size. The little boy wore a miniature soldier outfit, complete with a tiny red jacket and a black felt hat that was slightly too big for his head. He gripped a small toy sword tightly in his hand, swinging it gently back and forth as he looked around with wide, curious eyes. His parents walked close behind him, holding his hands at times, but mostly letting him wander a little as he took in the sights. They smiled knowingly at each other. This wasn't just a casual visit to London for their child. It was an experience, a chance to witness history and tradition up close. The little boy's excitement was contagious. Every few seconds, he would point to something new and ask questions that revealed his keen curiosity. "Mom, why do they wear red jackets?" he asked, tilting his head as he tried to comprehend the towering soldiers in front of him. "Why are the horses so big?" His parents laughed softly, answering each question patiently. "The red jackets are a symbol of their duty and honor," his father explained, "and the horses are trained to stay calm no matter what is happening around them. They help the guards with their work and ceremonies." The boy nodded seriously, as if he were trying to memorize every detail. In his mind, this was no ordinary day. He was learning about bravery, tradition, and respect in a way that no storybook could ever teach him. As the crowd waited, the atmosphere became more lively. Street performers nearby played cheerful tunes, adding to the festive feeling. Children ran around, waving small flags, while parents tried to keep up with them. The little boy, however, stayed rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on the grand gate through which the royal guards would soon march. He could hear the distant sound of drums and the faint clatter of hooves on stone. The noise grew louder and more rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, signaling that something important was about to happen. His grip on the toy sword tightened, and he instinctively straightened his tiny back, trying to mirror the discipline he had seen in pictures of soldiers. Then they appeared. A group of royal guards, dressed in bright red coats and black bearskin hats, marched into view with perfect synchronization. Their boots clicked firmly against the cobblestones, creating a rhythm that seemed to command attention. Behind them followed tall, elegant horses, each one calm yet majestic, carrying soldiers who guided them with subtle, precise movements. The crowd collectively held its breath, watching as tradition came to life right before their eyes. The little boy's jaw dropped, and he gasped quietly. He had seen pictures in books and on television, but nothing compared to seeing the guards and horses in person. The child's fascination was so intense that he barely noticed the people around him. He focused on the guards, studying the way they stood perfectly still when required, and the way they moved gracefully in unison when the drums signaled them to march. Every small movement seemed meaningful, deliberate, and full of pride. The little boy's parents exchanged glances, sharing a quiet smile. They had hoped this day would be special, but even they were surprised at how deeply their child was captivated. After a few moments, the boy took a step forward and imitated the soldier's posture. He raised his little hand in salute, holding it stiffly near his forehead, just as he had seen in the pictures at home. The gesture was unpolished, of course. He was still small, and his hand wavered slightly, but the determination in his eyes was unmistakable. His parents chuckled softly and whispered encouragement, careful not to embarrass him in front of the crowd. "That's it, sweetheart. Very good," his mother said, squeezing his shoulder gently. The boy's face lit up with pride. For him, this was more than just copying a soldier. It was a personal connection to something larger than himself, a link to courage, respect, and tradition. As he saluted, he noticed one particular guard standing directly in front of him. The guard's expression was serious, as always, but there was something in the way he held himself that seemed almost human. Even in the uniform, even on the towering horse, the guard seemed aware of the little boy. The child's heart raced. Was the guard looking at him? Was he acknowledging the tiny salute? The boy didn't know, but he held his stance even more firmly, determined to maintain the respect he felt inside. Around them, the crowd whispered and smiled, charmed by the innocent bravery of the little boy. Parents nearby nudged each other, pointing out the adorable scene, while tourists quickly raised cameras and phones to capture the moment. The little boy's imagination began to soar. In his mind, he was no longer just a child in a toy uniform. He was part of the parade. He imagined himself marching alongside the guards, riding a horse just as tall and proud as theirs. He pictured himself standing perfectly still, a real soldier among heroes, holding his position no matter what distractions came his way. The crowd, now fully aware of this small but determined figure, seemed to pause with him, allowing the magic of the moment to unfold naturally. Minutes passed, but for the boy, time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every movement of the guards, every careful step of the horses, and every sound of the drumbeat became magnified. He noticed details that even the adults seemed to overlook: the shine of the boots, the crisp lines of the uniforms, the subtle nods the guards gave each other as they moved. He felt like he was part of a world that was disciplined, respectful, and full of history. Even though he was small and young, he understood that this moment was important not just for him, but for everyone who witnessed it. Finally, the boy's parents gently guided him back slightly, allowing him to take a step closer to the edge of the cobblestone path for a better view. He didn't complain. Instead, he absorbed the scene like a sponge, storing every detail in his memory. Every time he looked up at the guards, he felt a mixture of awe and admiration, emotions so strong that they made him stand taller and hold the toy sword more confidently. The parents whispered quietly, reminding him to enjoy the moment, and he nodded earnestly. For him, this wasn't just a parade. It was a lesson about pride, respect, and the beauty of tradition. By the time the royal guards had fully positioned themselves for the ceremonial display, the little boy's face was glowing. He had not moved his salute once, and the attention from the crowd around him only seemed to encourage his small act of bravery. People were smiling, pointing out the little soldier to their friends and family. Cameras clicked, capturing the tiny figure who had bravely saluted amidst a crowd of grown adults. The moment felt almost magical, a quiet connection between innocence and disciplined tradition, a bridge between a child's imagination and the grandeur of history. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the parade began in earnest. Drums beat a steady rhythm, horses moved in coordinated steps, and the royal guards executed their precise maneuvers. Yet in the midst of all this spectacle, the little boy's tiny salute remained a focal point. For a brief, fleeting moment, the world seemed to slow down, allowing everyone to appreciate the charm and purity of the child's admiration. The guards marched on, the horses followed dutifully, but the boy continued to stand, small yet proud, holding his toy sword and saluting with all the dignity he could muster. By the end of the morning, even as the parade moved toward its conclusion, the memory of that tiny figure, so earnest, so respectful, so full of wonder, would linger in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. The child himself would carry the moment forever, a reminder that courage and respect can come in any size, and that even the smallest gestures, when done with sincerity, can touch hearts in unexpected ways. The little boy's eyes never left the royal guards. He had been standing there for what felt like hours, even though only a few minutes had passed, and he still held his tiny salute. Every detail fascinated him: the crispness of the soldiers' red coats, the precise way they marched, the glint of the boots in the sunlight, and the majestic horses that moved with such grace and strength. He could hear the faint jingle of the horse harnesses and the rhythmic pounding of hooves against the stone path. Everything seemed larger than life, and yet he felt strangely connected to it all, as though he belonged there, among the ranks of disciplined soldiers. The little boy noticed one guard in particular. Unlike the others who marched in perfect formation, this guard had a calm, quiet presence that seemed to stand out even from a distance. He was tall, his black bearskin hat towering over him, and his posture was impeccable. The boy's gaze followed every movement the guard made, from the steady sway of the horse's mane to the way the soldier's hand gently guided the reins. Something about the guard felt different, almost human, almost approachable, yet still commanding respect. The little boy's fingers tightened around the toy sword, and he raised his hand higher, holding it in salute as if to say, "I see you. I respect you." Around them, the crowd whispered and shifted. Parents nudged their children, pointing to the little boy, and cameras clicked constantly, capturing the charming scene. Tourists from different countries leaned forward, smiling and laughing softly, enchanted by the innocence and bravery of such a small child daring to salute a real-life soldier. Even some of the adults found themselves holding their breath for a moment, watching this tiny display of courage. It was rare to see someone so young demonstrate such genuine respect and admiration. The boy's parents watched from a few steps behind, hearts full of pride. They knew their child was captivated, but they didn't realize just how deep his fascination had grown. His father whispered softly, "Look at him, he's like a little soldier himself." His mother nodded, smiling. "Yes, and he seems to have chosen that guard," she said quietly. "It's almost like he wants to connect with him." The boy felt a strange sense of excitement and nervousness at the same time. He wanted the guard to notice him, but he wasn't sure if that would even happen. He kept his hand raised, standing as straight as he could, his eyes locked on the soldier. The world around him, the crowd, the noise, the sun, and the moving horses, seemed to fade, leaving only him and the royal guard. In that moment, the boy felt important, almost as if he had stepped into a storybook where he was the hero of his own little adventure. Then, something remarkable happened. The royal guard, who had been standing perfectly still as part of the ceremony, subtly shifted his gaze. His eyes met the little boy's for just a fraction of a second, and the boy felt a thrill run through his body. It was as if the guard had acknowledged his salute. The boy's heart skipped a beat. Could it really be true? Could this tall, disciplined soldier who had the entire crowd and ceremony to manage actually notice him? For a moment, the boy felt as though the world had paused. The hooves of the horses, the clatter of boots, the whispers of the crowd, all of it faded into the background. The little boy's hand wavered slightly, but he held it up, determined not to break the salute. He wanted the guard to know that this was his way of showing respect, that he understood the importance of duty and honor, even at his young age. The parents noticed the tiny exchange, though it was impossible for anyone else in the crowd to be sure what had happened. They smiled quietly, feeling a mix of pride, amusement, and wonder. Their child was experiencing something that would stay with him forever, a real connection, brief but meaningful, with someone he admired deeply. The boy imagined himself standing shoulder to shoulder with the guards. In his mind, he was no longer small. He was tall and strong, wearing a perfect red coat and a bearskin hat, riding a horse as majestic as any in the parade. He imagined marching in perfect rhythm, just like the soldiers, keeping his eyes forward, his posture straight, and his salute firm. Every time the guard subtly moved, the boy mirrored the motion in his imagination, feeling a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. Around him, the crowd continued to watch with quiet delight. People pointed out the little boy to their friends and families, and some even whispered about the bravery of the tiny figure. "Look at that little one. Isn't he adorable?" one parent whispered. Another added, "He's standing so still and he's saluting like a real soldier." Phones clicked, videos were recorded, and smiles spread across faces. The boy was unaware of the attention he was drawing. He was entirely absorbed in the moment, focused on the guard and the parade, and filled with awe at the pageantry before him. The royal guard, meanwhile, maintained his disciplined demeanor. Though trained to be stoic and professional at all times, there was a subtle softness in his expression as he acknowledged the tiny salute. He was aware of the child's admiration, and for a fleeting moment, the strict rules of ceremony seemed to allow a brief human connection. The horses remained steady, the drumbeat continued, and the formation held perfect symmetry, yet in the midst of all this precision, a small, innocent gesture had created a bridge between a child and a soldier. The boy's parents watched as he continued his tiny salute. "He's really brave," his mother whispered to his father. "He doesn't even look scared." His father nodded, smiling. "It's more than bravery," he said softly. "It's respect." And look at the way that guard responded. It's like they understand each other without words. The little boy, oblivious to the conversation behind him, simply felt proud. He had made a connection, however small, with someone he admired, and it filled him with joy and wonder. As the parade continued, the boy began to notice other details. He saw the tiny movements of the guards' hands as they guided the horses, the rhythmic tapping of boots against cobblestones, and the careful alignment of every soldier as they shifted position. Every small motion seemed intentional and meaningful, and he tried to copy them in his own way, raising his hands slightly higher, straightening his back, and standing as still as possible. He wanted to be part of the moment, even if only in his imagination. People around him continued to notice the child. A few photographers leaned closer, trying to get a better shot of the tiny soldier amidst the grandeur of the ceremony. Passers-by smiled warmly, charmed by the innocence and determination of such a young child. One elderly man whispered to his companion, "It's wonderful to see a child so captivated by history and tradition. It reminds us all of the importance of respect and admiration, no matter your age." The boy, unaware of these remarks, simply focused on the guard, feeling a growing sense of admiration and connection that he could not fully explain. As the minutes passed, the boy began to feel a sense of calm determination. He realized that this moment was special not just for him, but for everyone watching. He understood in his own small way that respect and admiration could be expressed in simple gestures, like a salute, and that even the smallest act of courage or honor could create a lasting impression. The boy felt proud, not just for himself, but for the sense of connection he had fostered between the child in him and the disciplined adult in the Royal Guard. By the time the first part of the parade ended, the little boy had experienced a range of emotions: excitement, awe, nervousness, pride, and wonder. He had stood firm, held his tiny salute, and felt, for the first time, what it meant to truly admire someone and be acknowledged in return. His parents were quietly amazed at his focus and dedication. They knew this day would be remembered forever, not just for the ceremony itself, but for the simple, heartwarming interaction between a small child and a tall, disciplined soldier. As the Royal Guards marched away to continue their duties, the boy lowered his hand, feeling a sense of fulfillment. His heart was still racing, and his mind was buzzing with images of the parade, the horses, and the soldier who had acknowledged his salute. Even as the noise of the crowd returned, he felt a quiet sense of pride and connection that would stay with him long after the parade had ended. In his mind, he had taken part in something grand and timeless, a moment where courage, respect, and admiration intersected, leaving a lasting memory for a small boy who dared to salute the Royal Guard. The little boy's excitement didn't fade as the parade continued. In fact, it grew stronger. He felt as though he was standing at the center of a magical world where everything was orderly, magnificent, and filled with purpose. The Royal Guards moved with perfect precision, and the horses followed each command without hesitation. Yet, amidst all this grandeur, the boy noticed details that most adults might have overlooked: the gentle flick of a horse's tail, the tiny adjustments a soldier made to his posture, the way the drumbeat seemed to guide every movement. Every small detail fascinated him and made him feel more connected to the pageantry before him. His tiny hands gripped the toy sword even tighter. He couldn't help but imagine himself standing among the soldiers, tall and proud, carrying out every duty with the same seriousness as the men before him. He raised his hand in salute again, trying to hold it as steady as possible. Even though his small fingers wobbled slightly, his determination never wavered. He wanted the guard to notice him again. He wanted to show that his admiration wasn't fleeting, that he truly respected the discipline, the tradition, and the dedication of the Royal Guards. The crowd around him had started to settle into a quieter rhythm. Some people whispered to each other, pointing out the little boy who stood so proudly among the spectators. Cameras clicked discreetly, capturing the enchanting moment of innocence amidst formality. Parents smiled and nudged their children, saying things like, "See how brave he is," and "Look at that salute. Isn't it wonderful?" The boy didn't notice the attention he was drawing. His focus remained entirely on the guard he admired. He studied every move the soldier made, trying to learn even the smallest gestures. His eyes sparkled with a mixture of awe and curiosity, and his tiny chest swelled with pride. For the little boy, this was more than a parade. It was a lesson in courage and respect. He was beginning to understand that being brave didn't always mean doing something big or heroic. Sometimes, it meant standing still, paying attention, and showing admiration in a simple, genuine way. He realized that even a small gesture, like a salute, could carry a powerful meaning if done sincerely. The thought made him stand a little taller, and he adjusted his posture, imagining that he was a real soldier in the Royal Guard. The guard he had been watching all along noticed the little salute once again. Although his face remained serious, a subtle nod almost imperceptibly acknowledged the child's respect. The boy's heart skipped a beat. Could it be possible that the guard had really seen him? Could it be that the soldier had returned his salute, even in the smallest way? The boy's imagination ran wild. In his mind, he was no longer a child standing among spectators. He had become part of the ceremony itself. He pictured himself marching alongside the soldiers, following every command, holding his toy sword as proudly as the real swords in the guard's hands. The boy's parents watched closely, their hearts full of pride and amusement. They whispered to each other, barely moving their lips. "He's completely captivated," his mother said softly. "Look at him, he doesn't even notice the crowd around him." His father nodded. "He's learning more than we could teach him in months," he replied. "He's learning about respect, discipline, and admiration, all by just standing there and observing." Both of them smiled quietly, understanding that this was a moment their child would carry with him forever. Around them, the parade continued in perfect rhythm. The horses trotted gracefully, their hooves striking the stone in time with the drumbeat. The guards shifted positions, their movements smooth and precise. Every now and then, the little boy adjusted his stance, trying to match the posture of the soldiers. He imagined himself giving commands to the horses, ensuring they stayed calm and steady. He pictured the other guards looking to him for guidance, as if he had grown taller and stronger in an instant. The thought filled him with joy and confidence. As the parade progressed, the boy began to notice how the soldiers worked together as a team. He saw subtle signs of communication: a tilt of the head, a shift of the reins, a glance exchanged between two soldiers that told him they were connected, relying on each other to maintain perfection. The little boy tried to mimic these gestures in his own tiny way, shifting his gaze from one guard to another, trying to understand the silent language of teamwork. He realized that being a part of something greater than oneself required patience, observation, and respect, lessons that seemed more important than any game he had played before. Despite being small and young, the boy's determination never wavered. Even when a gust of wind blew his tiny hat slightly askew or a horse moved closer, making him flinch, he held his stance. He raised his hand in salute with renewed vigor, determined to show that respect and admiration did not depend on size or age. The people around him continued to notice the child's bravery, whispering to each other, sharing smiles, and occasionally pointing cameras discreetly to capture the scene. The moment felt almost magical, as if time itself had slowed to allow the boy to connect with the tradition in his own special way. The royal guard he admired continued to perform his duties with precision, yet the boy sensed that there was a subtle acknowledgement, a silent recognition of the child's courage and respect. Though the soldier could not break his serious expression, the small nod and shift in attention were enough for the boy to feel seen. He felt a rush of pride, his chest swelling with emotion. In that instant, he understood something important. Even the smallest gestures, when given sincerely, could touch hearts and create meaningful connections. The little boy's imagination soared. He pictured himself riding a majestic horse, standing tall among the guards, and performing every maneuver flawlessly. He imagined the sounds of the drums echoing in perfect rhythm with his steps, the cheers of the crowd fading into a steady background, and the guard who had acknowledged him walking beside him with quiet pride. In his mind, the parade became a grand adventure, a story in which he was both the observer and a participant. Every movement he saw inspired him, every sound encouraged him, and every glance from the guard filled him with wonder. Even as the parade continued to unfold, the boy's parents noticed how deeply engaged he was. They whispered to each other, sharing smiles and quiet laughter. "He's learning more than we expected," his mother said. "He's discovering the meaning of respect and admiration in a way that books or lessons could never teach him." His father nodded, feeling the same sense of amazement. "And he's learning it with pure joy," he added. "There's nothing forced about it. He's connecting with the guards in his own way." The boy's focus remained unbroken. He watched as the royal guards shifted positions, guiding the horses and coordinating their movements with absolute precision. He saw the way each soldier depended on the others, how teamwork and discipline were essential to maintaining order and perfection. The little boy tried to imagine himself in that world. understanding that being part of something larger than oneself required patience, observation, and commitment. He began to realize that bravery wasn't only about standing tall, it was about understanding one's role and performing it with care and sincerity. Minutes passed, and the boy's admiration only deepened. Every small detail of the parade seemed important. The sway of the horses, tails, the shine of the boots, the rhythm of the drumbeat, and the subtle glances exchanged among the soldiers. The little boy's hands were now steady as he held his toy sword, and his salute remained firm and unwavering. He was no longer just a child watching the parade. He had become part of the story, a small but meaningful participant in a grand tradition that had existed for generations. Finally, the boy noticed that the royal guard he admired had paused briefly, allowing the little salute to linger a moment longer. The boy's heart raced with excitement. He felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, pride, and connection that words could not express. Even though the parade continued around him, he remained focused on the guard, knowing that this simple acknowledgement had created a bond that would stay with him forever. By the time the first half of the parade ended, the little boy's eyes were bright, and his cheeks glowed with pride. He had learned something valuable, not just about the parade, the horses, or the soldiers, but about courage, respect, and admiration. He had experienced the power of a small gesture, understood the meaning of discipline and teamwork, and felt a connection with someone he deeply admired. For a young child, it was a lesson that would last a lifetime. The boy's parents quietly guided him back slightly, letting him adjust and catch his breath. Yet even as he lowered his hand from the salute, his gaze remained fixed on the royal guards, his mind replaying the magical moments he had experienced. He knew, even at this young age, that he would never forget this day, the day he had stood among history, tradition, and grandeur, and had found a connection with a soldier who had recognized his admiration. The parade continued, but for the little boy, the world seemed different. Now, every step of the guards, every hoofbeat of the horses, every drumbeat and click of boots seemed sharper, more meaningful. He had spent the morning admiring them, holding his tiny salute, and feeling the thrill of being recognized, even in the smallest way, by the tall, disciplined guard he admired. But now a sense of wonder was beginning to mix with something new, a quiet tension, a kind of nervous excitement. The ceremony was moving toward a more critical part, and the boy sensed it. The guards began to change positions, moving in a more intricate formation. Their steps were faster, more deliberate, and the coordination required for the horses and soldiers to work together became more complex. The crowd hushed slightly, sensing the seriousness of this moment. The little boy watched intently, trying to memorize each movement. His tiny hands gripped the toy sword with renewed determination, and his posture stiffened. He felt as though the soldiers were showing him not just their skill, but the meaning of responsibility. Every small motion they made seemed vital, like it carried the weight of history. At that moment, a sudden gust of wind blew through the parade grounds. Flags fluttered sharply, hats tilted slightly, and the boy's own miniature bearskin hat slipped a little over his eyes. For a brief moment, he struggled to adjust it, his hand trembling slightly from both excitement and a touch of nervousness. His tiny salute wavered, and he feared that the guard might not notice him again. But then, through the chaos of the wind and the movement of the soldiers, he saw the guard glance toward him once more. That subtle acknowledgement gave the boy courage, and he straightened up, holding the salute even more firmly. The little boy began to notice how much responsibility the guards carried. Each horse needed guidance, each formation required precision, and one wrong movement could disrupt the ceremony entirely. He thought about the guard he had been watching all morning. That tall, serious figure had to manage so many things at once: horses, movements, commands, and even the eyes of the crowd. And yet, despite all of that, he had taken a moment, however brief, to acknowledge a small child standing in admiration. The boy's heart swelled with respect and gratitude. He realized that bravery was not only in the soldiers' strength and discipline, but also in their ability to remain calm and aware, even under pressure. The parade entered a particularly intricate part of the ceremony, where the guards moved in close formations, switching positions and guiding their horses through tight patterns. The boy's eyes widened with amazement as he watched the precision required to avoid even the smallest mistake. He imagined himself among them, trying to follow each step, feeling the pressure and responsibility that came with every motion. The horses were majestic, yet obedient, responding instantly to the commands of the soldiers. The boy felt awe for the partnership between man and horse, realizing that this bond was built on trust, patience, and constant practice. As the ceremonial maneuvers continued, a small incident occurred that drew the boy's attention more than anything else. One horse shifted slightly, its hooves scraping against the stone, and the guard immediately adjusted his stance and reins to maintain perfect control. The child's eyes were fixed on the action. He gasped quietly, realizing how quickly and skillfully the soldier reacted. It was a small moment, almost invisible to anyone else in the crowd, but to the little boy it was proof of true dedication and professionalism. He felt admiration growing into something deeper. He felt awe. The boy's parents watched in quiet amazement, noticing how seriously their child took every detail. "He's learning about responsibility in a way we can't even explain," his father whispered. "Look at the focus in his eyes," his mother nodded. "Yes, and he's learning that respect and discipline go hand in hand," she added. They both smiled, understanding that this experience was shaping their child's character, teaching lessons far beyond what any book or classroom could provide. As the parade moved forward, the boy felt a wave of emotion. He realized that this experience was more than just admiration. It was a lesson in understanding. He began to see that every movement, every salute, and every step was meaningful, not just a show for the audience. The soldiers and horses were performing a dance of discipline, history, and pride, and the boy felt privileged to witness it. He raised his tiny hand in salute once more, hoping to convey all the respect, admiration, and excitement he felt inside. The subtle acknowledgement from the guard earlier gave him courage to continue, and he held the gesture longer, feeling it deeply in his heart. Suddenly, the boy noticed that the crowd was beginning to shift closer to the central area of the parade grounds, and he felt a little nervous. He realized that the parade was reaching a climactic point, and he feared he might not be able to see the guard as clearly. He squeezed his parents' hands, and they guided him slightly forward to give him a better view. The boy's eyes remained locked on the guard, who was now moving with a heightened sense of focus, directing the horses and maintaining perfect formation. Every movement was deliberate, and the boy could see the weight of responsibility on the soldier's shoulders. The child's imagination ran wild. He pictured himself in the guard's place, riding a powerful horse, giving commands, and maintaining perfect discipline under the watchful eyes of a crowd. He imagined the pride of standing tall, holding a sword, and performing every duty with care and attention. Though he knew he was still small, he felt as if he had grown taller in that moment, lifted by admiration and courage. He understood in a way only a child could that greatness was not about size or strength, but about focus, care, and respect for the duty at hand. The parade reached a point where the guards moved into a ceremonial formation that required absolute precision. The boy noticed that every soldier's movement depended on the others, that a single misstep could affect the entire display. He marveled at the teamwork and coordination, trying to imagine how much practice and patience it must have taken. He felt his own heartbeat quicken, as if he were part of the team, performing in his mind alongside the guards. His tiny hand remained in salute, unwavering, as he immersed himself in the wonder of the moment. Then, a subtle moment occurred that the boy would remember forever. The guard he admired paused briefly to adjust his horse, and as he did, the boy felt that familiar, small acknowledgement again, a tilt of the head, a glance that seemed to say, "I see you, little one." The child's heart leapt. That small gesture, almost invisible to everyone else, felt monumental to him. He realized that connection could exist even without words, and that admiration could be recognized in a quiet, respectful way. He felt pride, joy, and a deep sense of belonging, even though he was still just a child in the crowd. The parents watched with quiet pride, sensing that this was a moment their child would never forget. They whispered to each other, sharing smiles and a sense of wonder. "He's learning about respect, courage, and connection in a way we could never teach him," his mother said softly. His father nodded. "Yes, and it's being taught not through words, but through action, observation, and experience. That's the most powerful way to learn." The boy, oblivious to the whispers, continued to watch with wide, attentive eyes. He noticed every detail, the sway of the horses, manes, the shine on the boots, the precise movements of the soldiers, and the subtle commands that guided every action. He realized that bravery and discipline were not just about performing well, but about paying attention, staying calm, and respecting every element of the task. The thought filled him with admiration and inspiration. As the parade continued, the boy felt a wave of calm determination. He understood that respect, courage, and focus were connected, and that even a small gesture like a salute could hold deep meaning. He imagined himself as part of the ceremony, standing tall and proud, holding his toy sword and performing every action with care and attention. He realized that being brave didn't mean being fearless. It meant paying attention, being present, and honoring what you admired. By the time the most complex part of the parade ended, the little boy's heart was full. He had witnessed skill, discipline, and teamwork at their finest, and he had experienced a personal connection with the guard he admired. He lowered his hand from the salute, feeling a mixture of pride, joy, and reflection. For him, this day had been more than a parade. It had been a lesson in courage, respect, admiration, and human connection. He knew that even though the moment was fleeting, the memory would stay with him forever, a treasure of understanding and inspiration that would guide him as he grew. The parade had finally reached its conclusion, and the little boy felt a mixture of awe and quiet satisfaction. The royal guards were slowly marching back toward their starting positions, the horses moving with graceful precision, and the steady rhythm of the drums fading gently into the background. The crowd began to shift, some people leaving, some lingering a little longer, capturing photographs and videos of the magnificent display. But for the little boy, the event had become much more than a spectacle. It had become a story, a lesson, and a memory that would stay with him forever. He kept his eyes on the guard he admired most, the tall figure who had, in small but meaningful ways, acknowledged his tiny salutes. The boy's hands, still holding the toy sword, shook slightly, not from fear but from excitement and pride. He had felt a connection, a silent recognition, that made him feel valued, respected, and brave. Though the guard remained stoic, the boy sensed warmth and awareness behind those disciplined movements. In his mind, the soldier was no longer just a figure in red and black. He had become a symbol of courage, dedication, and the respect that comes from doing your duty with care. The boy's parents followed him closely, their eyes soft with affection and pride. They had watched every expression on his face, every small gesture, and every heartbeat of attention he had devoted to the parade. They knew that this day had been extraordinary, not only because of the ceremony itself, but because of how their child had connected with it. "He's going to remember this forever," his mother whispered softly, almost to herself. His father nodded, adding, "And more importantly, he's learning lessons he will carry with him for life." As the guards continued to march, the boy began to wave a small goodbye, raising his hand in one final salute. His parents encouraged him gently, whispering that it was the perfect way to end the experience. The little boy's eyes sparkled as he imagined that the guard could see him, even from a distance, and that his respect and admiration had been felt and acknowledged. He imagined the soldiers and horses noticing him and his tiny salute, and it gave him a sense of pride that warmed his chest like sunlight. The boy's mind replayed the entire morning in vivid detail. He remembered the first moment he had seen the royal guards, the sharp sound of boots against cobblestones, and the rhythmic beat of the drums that had made his heart race with excitement. He remembered holding his toy sword and saluting with all the seriousness he could muster. He remembered the brief but meaningful nod from the guard, which had made him feel seen and valued. And he remembered the majestic horses, so calm yet strong, and how they had seemed to move as if in perfect harmony with the world around them. The little boy began to reflect on what he had learned. He realized that bravery was not always about doing something loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was about standing still, observing and showing respect in a quiet, sincere way. He understood that admiration could be expressed through simple gestures, like a salute, and that such gestures could be recognized and appreciated by those we looked up to. He understood that discipline, teamwork, and focus were not just skills for soldiers. They were values that could guide anyone, even a child, in their own life. Around him, the crowd had started to disperse, but many people continued to glance toward the little boy. They smiled, touched by his innocence and determination. Some whispered to each other, saying how inspiring it was to see a child so captivated by history and tradition. Others quietly recorded the final moments, hoping to capture the image of the tiny figure waving goodbye amidst the grandeur of the parade. The little boy, however, was unaware of the attention he was drawing. His focus was entirely on the guards, the horses, and the magic of the moment that had become a part of him. The boy's parents guided him gently away from the main parade area, but he continued to look back, waving and saluting until the last horse had disappeared from view. He felt a bittersweet mixture of happiness and longing. Happy because he had witnessed something extraordinary and had felt a personal connection with a soldier he admired, and longing because he wished the moment could last forever. His tiny hands finally relaxed, and the toy sword he had held all morning rested gently at his side, but his heart remained full with pride, admiration, and a sense of wonder. As they walked away from the parade grounds, the boy's parents spoke softly to him. "Wasn't that amazing?" his mother asked. "It was," the boy replied earnestly. "I feel like I was part of it." His father smiled. "You were," he said. "Even a small gesture can make a difference. You saw something wonderful and showed your respect." "That is bravery, too." The boy nodded thoughtfully, understanding for the first time that courage could come in many forms, and that even a small child could make a meaningful impact through sincerity and admiration. Later, as the family walked through the quiet streets, the boy kept replaying every detail in his mind. He thought about the way the guards had moved in perfect rhythm, how the horses had seemed almost alive with grace, and how the soldier had acknowledged his salute. He thought about the lessons he had learned: discipline, focus, respect, and the importance of small gestures. He realized that this experience was not just a story to tell, but a memory to carry in his heart forever. That evening, back at home, the boy carefully placed the toy sword on his bedside table. He lay down to sleep, but his mind was still full of images from the parade. He imagined himself standing tall, saluting with pride, and being part of something grand and meaningful. He imagined the guard, still serious and disciplined, somehow aware of the admiration of a small child. He imagined the horses, their manes flowing in the wind, moving gracefully across the parade grounds. In his dreams, he was no longer a small boy. He was a participant, brave, proud, and full of respect for the world around him. The next morning, the boy woke up with the same excitement he had felt during the parade. He ran to show his parents the drawings he had made, inspired by the sights he had witnessed. There were sketches of soldiers, horses, hats, and swords, all drawn with careful attention to detail. His parents marveled at the way he had captured the grandeur and beauty of the ceremony. "You remembered everything so well," his father said. "I think this parade has taught you more than you realize." The boy smiled, knowing that he had learned something very important. Admiration, respect, and courage could take many forms, and even small gestures could leave a lasting impression. Over time, the boy's memory of that day became a story he loved to tell. He would recount how he had stood among the crowd, holding his toy sword, and saluted the royal guards with all his heart. He would describe how he felt when the tall soldier acknowledged him, even in the smallest way. He would talk about the horses, the rhythmic drum beats, and the precision of every movement. Each retelling reminded him of the lessons he had learned, lessons about respect, discipline, bravery, and human connection that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The parents noticed a change in their child as well. He became more attentive, more thoughtful, and more respectful of small acts of kindness and responsibility in daily life. Whether at school, at home, or in the playground, he began to understand that courage and respect were qualities anyone could show, regardless of age or size. The memory of the parade, and the small but meaningful acknowledgement from the Royal Guard, had left a lasting impression. It had inspired the boy to carry himself with pride and to show respect for others, just as he had learned to do that memorable day. Even years later, when the boy looked back on the parade, he remembered the feeling of being part of something larger than himself. He remembered the excitement, the pride, and the quiet connection with a soldier who had, in a small way, recognized his admiration. That memory remained vivid, a symbol of bravery, respect, and the power of small gestures. The parade had ended, the horses had returned to their stables, and the soldiers had gone back to their duties. But for the little boy, the experience had become a lifelong lesson and a treasured story. The day at Horse Guard's parade had started as a simple outing, a chance to watch soldiers and horses in ceremonial display. But it had become so much more. It had taught a child about respect, bravery, discipline, and admiration. It had shown him that even the smallest actions, a salute, a gesture, a look, could create connection and meaning. It had given him a memory filled with wonder and joy, a story that he would carry with him forever, reminding him of the magic that happens when innocence meets tradition and admiration meets recognition. And so, as the boy lay in bed that night, dreaming of horses, soldiers, and the parade that had captured his heart, he knew something important, that the world was full of moments worth noticing, worth admiring, and worth respecting. And he knew that he, too, could be brave in his own way, holding on to the lessons he had learned and sharing them with the world around him, just as the Royal Guard had shared, without words, a small but unforgettable acknowledgement of a child's admiration.